You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Allan Andersen Christensen, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Allan, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm extremely happy to have you on the show today and been looking forward to this episode all summer.
Likewise, Lasse, and good to be on board. It's my pleasure, all pleasure.
Even though actually today we're sitting in your house, so you should be welcoming me because we sort of moved the studio out to your place, or actually I took a hold of your wife's studio to do this recording.
Yeah. My wife is doing a tech startup with her partner, and they have this podcast studio. So we were lucky enough to borrow this today for this amazing podcast.
So that's actually that's awesome, and it's tremendous. And I hope everyone can also hear the quality of the microphone and everything, because we just had a lot of fun with drinking coffee and it and all that sounds, right?
Yeah.
But Allan, you're leading digital adoption, and change, and you've been doing that in a large enterprise while ChatGPT sort of struck the earth as an asteroid. How did you initially approach generative AI, and what has changed since your initial approach to it?
I would say initially, as many others of your good, I would say podcast people you have had, it was embracing it in the beginning, very much embracing and understanding the scope of it, understanding, I would say, the opportunities residing in a new technology, emerging technology, I would say, and going from that, we went more into a structured approach. With a full baseline in cost efficiency and operational efficiency. So I'm employed and running a business where the overhead and in a generic business. So for us, it was to highlight where actually to apply AI and finding a good landing place for it.
There must also have been some considerations around how to keep a focus on the things you were doing before while moving into this AI space. Suddenly AI hit, right? I used the word struck like a meteor, right? Or an asteroid.
Yeah.
And how did that sort of skew your plans?
It really didn't, to be honest. I run an adaptive division, right? And I have a mandate. So as you say, it struck overnight. It struck over a period of time, so to say. I calibrated the department within a week, looking at projects that were profitable or prosperous, and say, okay, what do we want? What do I want to continue with? What makes sense in the point of the business? And by that, I was reshaping the entire product portfolio within a week and say, okay, we have a new technology, we have to explore it. What darlings will we kill? What projects will we close? And which one will we reset it with the technology?
So within a week, I think a lot of enterprises will think that's quite fast compared to so many of them are still just starting out.
Yeah.
So the good question is obviously, what did you do, and what were the first things you put onto this plate? Right. You're leading digital in a company in Denmark, which is the most digital country in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe Singapore might be in some aspects, right? So this is interesting. What did you do, and what will you do differently today?
Firstly, I sat down with the team of experts. I have amazing SMEs, and they know their game. For them, it was new as well, right? It was kind of having a funnel and say, okay, we have this new technology. This is what we do today. I have a plan of recalibrating what we do. What is your input for that? And some of them have been exploring more on Gen AI than others, and we came to a baseline and say, okay, where would this be applicable? Where could we actually adapt at a fast pace and adopt the technology into the tech stack we have? So initially it was a team effort to say, okay, where do we apply? And running without a strategy as such. It was more buying time to explore and understanding the quality, I would say also the complexity, and also how we could adopt it in the business. to the question, what I would do differently, I would still,
because obviously that was
yeah,
GPT-3 you were playing around with in the beginning, right?
Absolutely. What I would do differently, I would calibrate in the same sense, because I think that's a missing part of the Nordic culture. It takes too long time for us actually to run and learn.
Compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah, not compared to the rest of the world, but compared to the Nordics. I've been in a few Nordic companies. We have a long lead time until we actually try it out. For us, it was fairly easy to say, okay, now we adopt it and we go about. What I've been doing more was not engaging as many stakeholders initially, because we increased the demand to apply the new technology before we had a good grasp of time and the framework and how we would go about. So I would explore some of the use cases more internally before going about. But for us, it was a struggle, right? So it was not only in tech and IT or data, it was all over the place. So we had a different approach to it. We didn't have to go to the business and tell them what we had. It was actually not ring fencing, but trying to meet the expectations of a technology that everyone had, right?
Yeah. But also technology you didn't really know what could actually do, and was what we thought it would do good. Is that what it would actually be good at being productive, and all those considerations, right? And you go about evangelizing immediately. I think that's quite bold.
Yeah.
You just went out and talked to stakeholders and pulled in ideas for something that was so.
It was bold. I've done some bold stuff early in a major bank in Stockholm, where we were selling ice cream before we even had the ingredients in the box, right? So we had a stand, right, and no ice cream, and it was mid of July, right? So that hit me hard, because I under expected the lead time in Sweden to adopt. Here, I would say we didn't have all flavors, but we had some.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the same situation. But it was bold. But I felt sometimes we forget about how intuitive we can be, right? I had a good feeling of how the team could cope it. I talked to the SMEs and they were ready for it. I handpicked a few stakeholders that I am very familiar with, and they know what we do, and we have been doing projects for them in prior. So they were also looking at this from a very explorative sense. So by that, we went out to the stakeholders, but it was kind of a control chaos, to be honest.
Okay, that's nice. So your recommendation would be to do something similar, or would you say more today? The problem is, you said, we probably kept it a little bit more internal. You said that just before, right?
Exactly.
And then go to the stakeholders afterwards. But today, you've had Microsoft pushing and OpenAI, obviously every player in the space pushing out, saying aggressive statements that you don't need to hire developers or hire graphic workers. Your people will be 20-30% more productive, and so on and so on and so on. You have all this messaging that are hitting sea levels all the time. So you see stakeholders today are getting hit with these messages. So would you be able to do that today at all, right?
Yeah, it's been a massive push from all industries, big techs, etc. And honestly, when we were in dialogue with some of them, we felt that the technology was very premature. So the first we did before going to the stakeholders was actually applying OpenAI within our Azure instance, right? So we had a kind of controlling the part of governance and the parts that were really, I would say, repelling in the initial phase of Gen AI. It's not secure, and how do you keep your boundaries, etc. So we kind of did that in the team before we went to market internally to say, okay, everyone in the team was equipped to say, we have a governance, it is secure, we can do this in an all instance, we're not exposing data. So if I go back in the days, if we can say that, in the early Klondike of Gen AI, a lot of conversations actually stranded on those topics. And that what we did was actually to demount those initially and say, okay, we are past due that. So with the first stakeholders we went to was legal and presenting them the plan before we went to market, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't have to recall that at a later stage because we were in compliant. So some of these stages I would still do, but the team worked tremendously hard in the initial phase because they had to learn at the same time we went to market, right?
But do you think this is what's happening to companies that are trying to adopt this right now, right? That they're trying to say, can we hold this internally and test it out, or do you think my key thing here is, do you think we have rash IT statements about this is not secure, we're closing it down, simply because they don't feel they have the time to take the playground approach, the sandbox approach in IT before stakeholders are pushing, are knocking on the door to get something from this?
I would say we are on the verge of data, IT, technology departments to let everyone know that they need the time to play. If you go back to the old data lakes and stuff, right, we had a data discovery area where you brought in your stuff to discover before you went into production. And some of the methodologies that we have been using and applying in other projects or the track record everyone has is that we need to free up time for this, because elsewise we end in a game where we tend to have a bad influence on the department because we don't deliver, or it isn't fast, it isn't paced enough. It was the same. I was very bold, and we had personal conversations on this in the beginning. I say, like, I don't want to pay a consulting company the full money any longer because they're not ready. The questions I had for them in the initial phase of Gen AI, they couldn't answer.
No.
They couldn't answer them because they were learning at the same time. So if I look back in time and actually exercise the same on my own department, right? They were learning as we went to market.
Yeah.
So if I could redo something, I would have a bit more playground and less push. I talked to the team a few days ago, and now we are not on the other side, but we are past the first initial Klondike, and they're actually quite happy about it because it built in a pressure that they haven't had before in a technology.
Yeah.
Usually, no one cares about the technology they work in. They
These
care
are also
about
the
the
stories.
output. Yes.
If this is also the stories you'll tell your kids, right?
Exactly. And it's an amazing Klondike. It still is, right? So it might flatten a bit now, but it will accelerate again. So it, for me, sometimes I look at myself and say, I'm in the midst of this, right? And it's not done. It's still so much to do. So I'm thrilled and excited about the next five years.
Is anything ever really done, Allan?
That's my mantra, right? I don't believe in transformation. I've tried to kill that at several CEO conferences and stuff, right? Because what is transformation? It's not going to be a debate on philosophy and methodology, but I've been in so many transformations and I've rarely seen the harvest of them, right?
But the only thing also, I think sometimes that's because we look at the human today as the apex of evolution, right?
Exactly.
We are teleologically looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
We became this wonderful being, the paragon of animals, whatever. What is it Shakespeare says? But in reality, we're also just in the flux.
Yeah, we're in the flux. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So
there's no permanence here, right? It's just moving.
So and you have had some tremendous guest addressing change and stuff. For me, without being bold, just by experience, I haven't seen any adaptive companies in the Nordics. No one adopts because no one is ready to adopt. We'll have some questions later that you have put forward to me, but I don't see any adoptive companies. I see companies struggling with framing it as a transformation, right? They have to transform their landscape, etc. And now they have AI, and then they have a poor data quality, etc. I see no companies in the Nordic are ready to say, okay, if we have new technology, we'll just adopt it because we are ready. Our infrastructure and everything is in place to do so. Everyone is struggling somehow.
There's always this kind of integration or assimilation or something, making it
exactly. And then at the same time, you see all these big tech saying like, we'll just you can spare all your developers and stuff, right? You don't need them. Okay, but who's integrating it then?
Yeah,
who's actually putting the pieces together?
Yeah, and like I spoke with Susan Walsh about, you have these standard, we have a standard system for you, it's easy peasy. Yeah, but the problem is the standard system doesn't fit with the way we are, the data ontologies and the data taxonomies and the processes that we run. So we need to figure out what falls outside of the system, right?
Exactly.
So many things, and I just discussed this yesterday. Actually, so many things in just the back office finance functions are falling outside of an ERP as well, and you'd be surprised, right? But there are so many things in every company. That's why Excel exists.
yeah, Excel is still a key, or you can't even say an application, but it's a key part of any operational business, right?
Yeah, that's they're like the sword is part of your arm, right? Excel is part of your.
I've seen hundreds of startups be having like a very nice front end, and when you open the hood, you'll have Excel.
but you said something. You don't just put something into production. You said we don't get to production by doing this. You said before there are some.
Yeah.
We need to take some steps before we get into production. So this is the difficult question here, right? And I didn't at all prepare you for this one. But is Copilot, when enterprises adopt Microsoft Copilot and buy that, do they then have AI in production?
No, I would just say that's just an enabler to Teams and Microsoft. I don't see it as. No. I would say no.
It's a shortcut for a lot of companies to say, "Oh, we have AI."
You have. But then again, it's a long discussion, right? We could discuss it for hours with a lot of brainy people and say, what is AI? Because if you'll ask some of the professors from universities, we are not even close. We have like some technology out in the market. It's not quant. It's not anything. It's not ML. It's not DeepL. It's a big, I would say some would refer to it as a language model. If I would say that if you apply and you integrate Copilot to your company, it's a learning model. It's not a language model. It's something that you learn from, right? And I was at a conference earlier this year where some of the leaders of OpenAI said, like, it doesn't matter what your kids will study in the future because they will have a Copilot on the side, right, fixing all this stuff. It might be it's a bit of a glimpse into the future that the topic doesn't matter. It matters which person you are, etc. But for me, I'm not putting anything bad on Microsoft in this podcast, but I would say we have seen so many releases from the tech companies over the past year, and I can't in my career recall software that has been so unfinished that we have seen. So Copilot is Copilot, right? But it's, for me, it's just a front end to OpenAI.
Remember, he said it as an euphemism. He's trying to say it nicely.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, but you're.
So for me, it's kind of your enabler, and it's a plug-in to what you have, right? It's kind of Google-ish in your Teams channels, etc. Where you have it, right? And does it do good? Yes, and you can run it on your own data, as we have seen internal chatbots, etc. But referring to that you have applied AI to your business, it's a stretch.
But that messaging also that you just mentioned about saying that, you won't need to educate and blah blah because you'll have a Copilot. I think that's so flat.
Yeah,
honestly, I think it's like looking at how we are today. Technology companies that are looking far ahead technology-wise, you should think, right?
Yeah.
They can't even see that knowledge and education and training has been developing over years all the time under pressure from innovation.
Exactly.
So these things change, and the human demand is a fractal that will always remain somewhere in this loop, right? It's eternal fractal. Just zoom out, and if humans are not educated to ask the right questions of their AI models,
then we will have a world bias, right?
Yeah, but exactly. Yes, we have a world of yesterday, actually,
exactly.
Just done by AI models, right? That trained on yesterday's data. I'm just so flabbergasted that they can come up with these kind of statements and be like, how can you say this? This is so synchronous looking right now, right? Not diachrone looking long term, right?
I think, to be fair on the big techs, they have been in the same space as we have been, right? They've seen this emerging technology, and OpenAI kind of took them all with the pants down, and they had to develop overnight, right? Yeah. They had any executive meeting at Google or Apple or whatever had one headline.
Yeah.
What about AI?
And airports.
And airport, so they've been struggling also to get their arms around it and understanding this. But at the same time, they've seen this enormous opportunity to sell ice cream to the world because everyone had a demand at the same time. And we saw all these graphs in the beginning, that the adoption rate and how many smartphone was there, and everyone is capable of using it. It's a nice front end, right? It's not delicate, but it's a nice front end, and most people can use it. If you look at the OpenAI front end, and it's not a front end podcast we're discussing today, it's not nice. It's kind of a programmer front end still, right? Mm-hmm. But everyone uses it, and for me, it actually ties into, so what expectations do we have on how intuitive the back end should be in companies?
Yeah.
Because everyone is using a front end that is easy, right? Because it kind of is the Spotify model. I want to find it. If I know the name or some of it, it will locate it for you, and it will give you an answer to that. You don't have to be schooled for 15 years to do that. And for me, that's a tipping point in how to use technology compared to 15 years.
But is that really true, right? I saw this survey over the summer, which I spent in Japan, really nicely actually, and we talked about that as well. That that this looks like a UX to people, right? It looks like that. It's easy to talk to, but we've never interacted with systems before the way where we get something back, and it also seems more like it's a different thing. It doesn't. I think people are cheated a little bit by the feeling that it's simple to talk to, because it's actually very difficult to point down.
Is, and you're of course it's to the prompt, right?
Yeah.
I talked with my mom and dad about it. My mom is 70, right? And I had to translate it to them as I translated Bitcoins 10 years ago, actually, to tell them what crypto was. And now I had to, not had to, but we had a conversation on technology and my job, etc. And I said, like, okay, so if you go into Google, right? Google was initially a search engine free of advertising. The key was to bring you an answer as quick as possible, no advertising. So you and I and all our colleagues and everyone we know have been building Google for 20 years to a multi-billion business, right? We've been building what they have.
Yes.
But I said to my mom, okay, if you want to find a specific pair of jeans, you type in blue jeans, right? You type in blue jeans in Google and you will have a shitload of different jeans, right? But if you type in Levi's 501, 32 by 32, then you will have a specific pair of jeans. So the idea around that we have actually educated people to prompt better in Google for 20 years, give them an advantage, not to the full extent, but it gives them the grasp of how do I go to this? And then your prompt in OpenAI will evolve over time. But initially, in the beginning, most of people can find what output they are looking for.
Yeah, but the difference is just, there's no thing out there to be there's no Levi's 502s out there for when you use LLMs, right?
No.
You have to sort of narrow down a part of its brain.
Yeah, you really have to find that gap,
and then hope that it's been trained on what you're looking for,
exactly,
and can infer something on it, right?
And that's why OpenAI and other of these Claude and others, they will evolve over time, and as they have more power. But in essentially the discussion with them, or not discussion, but the kind of educating, right? Because that's actually what we do nowadays. I educate my parents in the present because it's so different to the future. And educating them and having a conversation on OpenAI, I wouldn't have imagined that my parents were actually interested in it, right? So I said, like, to my parents, I've been out of Facebook since 2007 because my aunt and stuff went into it like, this is going to be a place where I don't want to be, right? And the same with crypto. I was in crypto before my parents knew about it. And when they were interested, like, I need to sell what I have. And now we have OpenAI, right? And we have these few pillars of big global translations. And one of them is OpenAI. And as people were prompt better, and now everyone is looking for prompt engineers, and you have your Copilot, but your usage of Copilot is not better than what you actually highlighted a few minutes ago, is your knowledge and how you go about, right? Because elsewise it's just it's just a space where you can put in some questions and you'll have some answers. But if you don't do it in a structured manner, technology is not a saver.
It's banal, right? And it's the most banal analogy that everyone came out with, within, I think, almost hours of ChatGPT came out. The calculator analogy, right? Saying that a calculator didn't make every mathematician and financial worker in the world obsolete. Or rather, it gave us more to do. That's one thing. And two, you can't really use a calculator if you don't know what to ask it and what to expect back. So you have to be quite good at math to use a calculator the right way.
When I go to conferences, and in the beginning we talked about AI, right? Everyone was interested in use cases. What use cases do we have? What do you have in production? What have you done? They still have that.
It's still that world.
But I kind of mapped it out why we in the Nordics are in the frontier of digitalization and adopting technologies. Is that if I take a close look at Europe, Germany is the iOS, right? That's the main software we have in Europe. It's by far the biggest country, and if the wheels are turning in Germany, it kind of pitfalls to other. It falls to others, right? We would be affected by that. If Germany has a poor economy in the German region, we would also be affected by it. So Denmark is kind of an app in iOS. So we actually, for us, it's easier to take a 3 degrees turn or something else, to steer out of it.
Definitely, we're not an OS.
And by that, I would say we also have a hunger to adopt it because it's a part of our DNA when we go internationally or global, that we are so digitized and we have everything in place, which we have compared to many other countries. Still, we have a lot to do, but we are far ahead, to put it like that. And in that sense, it's kind of, we also getting to become a country where the big techs is applying their technology to get a feedback on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we have a high level of education, we have a stable political environment, and you have a region of.
And for some weird reason, we're not afraid of data privacy.
No.
That's a peculiarity that I think most of the big techs are
the legal
happy about.
counsels or the lawyers who got it about that Microsoft is fully nice.
But we have so much trust, right? We trust all of our institutions. We're Protestant to the hilt, right? And we just like, no one's going to cheat me. But some people do.
Yeah.
But that's why we trust privacy, right? Here's my data. You'll probably keep it safe somewhere and not sell it to.
But looping it back to the question we initially, like translating it to my parents, it means that it actually it went broad very early, right?
Yeah.
In the early days, and you had a lot of users. Now it's time for us actually to sum it up and see where we are and how we go about. And back to the initial first question on would I do something differently? I would keep it a bit more in-house. Elsewise, I think leaders are missing intuitive and bold approaches. We end up in analysis and strategies and having consultancies in and doing workshops, etc. The only one who actually know the business we work in is ourselves, right?
Yeah, true. That's a good. That's a great point, Allan. Really great point, and also something I always look deeper in your company to see if you can find what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
But also, let's also talk about scale, right? I think that's interesting. Also, it used to be also the thing we talked about also with RPA, how to get to scale, how to get. It's a thing every time we talk about new technology, especially for an IT professional. Is this technology easy to scale? Because it's just an open model and it's its own UX, it's easy peasy. We already touched a little bit on that, or is it more delicate than that?
Depending on the approach and the use case, I would say. We took an approach on generic law in our company and said, okay, what is the? Then we took a few cases. So I would say we were more scaling the use case than the technology itself, because the technology is the technology, right? We are not outbuilding the engine or the language model as such. We're just utilizing the power to put more, I would say, content into it. So by running the case, we actually went more single-stringed in the beginning to test it out. And then the volume for me is not a scale, right? It's not a scale of the technology. It's actually just outbuilding the use case volume. So to that question, I would say the only one who can scale OpenAI is OpenAI.
Yeah. So what you're alluding to is more from the enterprise perspective. It's about the scale business case more than the scale of technology. It doesn't matter. The scale of technology doesn't matter. But IT people want to have something that's big enough to matter for them to monitor and make.
Yeah. And I wanted. It was my intention to dilute the question a bit, because that's what IT usually does, right? If they invest in it, they need to have a solid case that now we can scale it to all departments.
That's why we have Citrix in the world, right? Yeah. No business person ever chose Citrix, right?
No. It's so true. But I would say I've been visiting all departments in the company, and no one would not have any use cases. Everyone has use cases on this. Some I would say better than others. But I see AI, Gen AI as water, right? It'll find its way. Some would be more, I would say, mature in the initially, but over time, if you look at the Nordics, we are a service company. We are one big service company. We don't produce much, right? Our agriculture is not dying out, but they have scaled into massive, larger productions and not 50 farms any longer. If you look at how we do oil and stuff in Norway and we do windmill, etc., we are de facto a service company. or a service country, one could say.
Mm.
And by that, it's unlimited how you can scale OpenAI and GenAI, because that's what we do. We live off services.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I ask myself in the morning, right, would someone die if I didn't turn up to my job? No. And
that's like, so I can't remember who said it. Do we need ChatGPT in our cars? Right? Someone said that on my podcast. I'm like, well, that now you're touching upon something, you know, that's not service but a thing. Right?
Yeah.
Giving I don't need my refrigerator to speak back to me. I just need it to freeze, you know,
Yeah,
my
exactly.
stuff, keep it cool, right? There's something there, right? So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The service company thing analogy is quite good on the Nordics, right? And that's also where people should look at the cases, right? Where do we do services? How can we improve our services?
Yeah.
And then scale it around that. And but I just think and we're not going to touch deeper into that, but the whole IT logic of operations and scale there compared to the business logic, just seeing good business cases. That's all we care about.
But shouldn't we now have the question and discussion on, you know, what business operates without IT and data? No.
Yeah, no
businesses, right? But we are still having these divisions, fragmented divisions, where you have your IT vertical and you have your data vertical and you have your technology vertical, or some it's combined, etc. Right?
Mm.
Your business is those verticals. It's so integrated in everything you do that if we don't go out of that boundary that some have ring fenced their divisions in for departments forever, the business will suffer over time.
Every business is a digital business today, right?
Exactly.
But why? Okay, so now we're going down that route anyway. But why do we then have, you know, you have a data team in your IT department, and then you also have a data team in your finance department? You know, that happens all the time, right?
Yeah, and
is that good or is that bad?
I don't know. We have come to an age, Lasse, where we have seen a few cycles, right?
Yeah.
And some of the cycles, I'm turning 46 tomorrow. So by that, I've seen.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I've seen 2 business cycles or 3, right? Where I come to the point where I've experienced and I'm aged enough. I've a mileage that I've seen this before, but in a different way. Right? Normally, I talk to people 20 years ago and say like, this is the new thing. And I say like, okay, we've done this 20 years ago. Looks slightly different, was named different, framed different, but it's the same thing. And looking at it from my end on how we should do it, of decentralizing, centralizing, I've come to the conclusion, whatever works. I've seen some where the decentralizing works, some where it doesn't, but we need to be more fluid in how we actually employ our colleagues, right? And our employees. I would, if you go to the extent, I would take the pool of any job you had in a company. Then I would say, kind of how you've been building cryptos, right? You've done that and say like everything is in there, and then you bid on the task or whatever you have, right? With the right person. I know it's very fluid to do it like that, but the essence is that we have so many employees sitting in positions doing stuff, and they could actually help out elsewhere.
Yeah. So make a hyper matrix.
For me, it'll be a hypermetric thinking of it. Danish company Clever have done it, right? They have no titles, and of course you have some tasks, but you're open to take on tasks in
but then you get back to the thing you said before about Denmark being and the Nordic countries being able to do things because we're smart and lean, right? And then you try to do the same things for you know, I don't know, Cognizant, to say, you have all 300,000 employees bidding on the same task.
I know it's kind of it's more vision, right?
Yeah.
But the thinking is to, if we never down to the listeners, is that we need to look at the conformity on how we are building ourselves, how we are composing ourselves, and how we actually going about. And this takes really C-level presence, where the better C-level is connected, the better the business will run. We will see an era now of the next 5-10 years where disconnect with C-levels will have a huge impact on your business. And at some conferences, talking about being bold, I've killed the enterprise architect, right? I've killed the enterprise architect because how can you oversee cloud architecture, data architecture, platform architecture, which is evolving with a massive speed, unseen, and it, you know, and by that the enterprise architect should oversee all this, and at the same time take a decision on what would be rightful for the company, and he or she would be reporting to CFO, sometimes CIO, other times whatever. At third times, right?
So it's all the technology pressure we're having right now. All the things you said, everyone's a digital company, but it's digital and technology not just about enforcing the right organization then, isn't it? Everything we do. Bo, on the last podcast, he said that humans are so limited in ability, but yet we still manage to together or something like that, right? To build amazing things, even though we have this limited ability. He said that is constant as well, right? I think so. What you're alluding to is more like the organization is important here, that we change out the roles and use people the right way, and that's not a technology discussion, or is it?
Yeah, I would think they are interlinked, right? You don't have a good technology discussion without having a good C-level. Because if you look at some boards that I've been talking to, they have brilliant, solid business characters, right? They've been building business for 50 years, billion businesses, whatever business they've had. But it's harder for them to understand what the future brings. It's harder for them to cope how massive technology have been affecting their business, right? Normally I would take up a backstep into time and say, okay, so when you started with internet and your web page, what was the strategy? They had none, right? Because some of their competitors had kind of an image of the company, and now you can do it online, right? E-commerce evolved, I would say, roughly 5 years after the internet kind of got attraction, right? Because then you understood the technology and you saw the consumer behavior changing. The consumer behavior actually enforced e-commerce because we were demanding to buy stuff online. It was not the companies say like, we want to sell to you. So you had, I would say, some pioneers saying like, I want to buy my stuff online. It's online. I can buy it. I don't have to go to the store. And I think we will see some of the same with OpenAI. I'm not saying like they in parallel, or there are similarities, I would say. But if you don't have a C-level who is coping and understanding that change and revisiting the case of change in their operating model, then you'll have a company that might be sidetracked or might be challenged by how technology and digital.
But what if our C-levels can't right now see the benefit of technology right now? Should you just? I think I had this discussion yesterday. It might play into another question I want to ask you. That we need to just sort of, maybe you can't see the value right now, but it is coming, especially with AI. Something is happening. You have to acknowledge that something is happening, right? And then maybe just prepare by modernizing your data landscape and your application landscape, right? So we had a morning session together a couple of months ago where your focus was very much on that, data modernization and to some extent app modernization. So is that what you need to do today? Every company needs to do that. Even though you can't see right now what you need to do, you should prepare yourself for the advent of something bigger that is definitely coming. Is that what you're getting at?
I would say a data modernization is key. The product I've seen failing over the last 20 years has been in poor data quality, poor governance, right? And now you have OpenAI and steroids challenging your business, right? And you are still struggling with, you don't have principles for how you go about in your data landscape. Some would say like, we keep the modernization as kind of old-fashioned, but in the end, we are not better than what we are before we apply or enable technology. And right now we are exposed. So I'll say C-level are exposed because the most unsexy part for a C-level to invest in is your data modernization.
Yes.
You can't see it.
Almost any kind of modernization, right?
Yes.
It's like,
infrastructure,
so I have to take something we already did and just make it new, but not really getting any new benefits necessarily.
If the listener doesn't know it, but I'm quite bold, and I went to a conference with some CISOs, right, CIO and CISOs, and then I said like, okay, what I find hard about CISOs is that no one wants to see you for a year. If they see you, they know we have a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not, underestimating the presence and the solid work doing by CISOs globally. But actually, the CEO wouldn't care about it, because if you don't have a cyber attack or ransomware attack, you just have to do it for the sake of audits, right? You're not utilizing it to actually become better and improve your business, because you have not linked what the CISO does into your data landscape.
It's the same problems that audits have, right? Auditors have.
Exactly. And if you look at it, data modernization or IT or infrastructure modernization, any modernization is so unsexy for a board because you can't really see it.
Okay, but why is it then sexy now?
Because ERP became sexy.
When?
With OpenAI.
And can you just elaborate a little bit on that? I think I know what you're getting at here, but just elaborate a little bit on it.
If you look at the heartbeat of the organization, is that we are a service country. We have kind of concluded that earlier today, right? A service country relies on transactions. So we have a bunch of transactions, right? Then we have to engineer our processes to say you have different approvers in your business to approve a certain flow, right? All that is what we've been talking about for the past half an hour. It's the quality of that brings you to a state where you can excel to your competitors. The more efficient you are in your generic business that doesn't really, I would say, build on top of your business, the stronger you are in the game, right?
Yeah.
So I have the rule of three that I could judge any company in the world on, and they are all relying on the ERP. If I go to my bank, the first thing I would look at is how intuitive is the mobile bank app? How easy is it to get around?
Yeah.
The second part is, how does your Omni look like, right? How easy is it to get in touch with you? And the third part is, what is the quality and time of when you answer? If I take that, I could apply that to any company on a global scale. That's actually what the end consumer judges a company on. Because many of the companies we see nowadays are similar, right? Consulting firms, banks, insurance companies, they do the same. The interest rates are the same. The business they do, they're the same. In the end, you're touching upon what you mentioned 20 minutes ago, the human, right? The relation.
Yeah.
So if you add that as a part of your Omni and you have a relation and it replies in a good timely manner, etc. I could, if for instance, if you order something on the internet and if you don't get an email within 5 minutes of a confirmation of what you bought,
this reset password thing, and it doesn't show up, like
exactly, and then you would reset your password 3 times, and it just it gets into a clutter, and then we reach out to customer service, etc. And sometimes the confirmation mail ends up in your spam or whatever. But we just kickstart the Omni boost where we contact every, I've ordered it, money is withdrawn, where is it, etc. So if you look at the ERP, why it becomes sexy, it's the heartbeat of any organization, because that's where you have your transactions. That's where you have your services. Everything you do in the future will be built on top of that.
So if you have the 3 things you in place, you just said, right? Good interface and easy to get in contact. We have good quality. Then you just need efficiency.
Exactly. And in the end, that we misses out the point sometimes what the customer actually expects.
But everyone's so fixated on using AI right now to make the customer interaction more sexy. And I think sometimes you're already succeeding there. You have the customers already hooked, right? So what about? So maybe they should be looking a little bit more at how you do your back office more sexy or more efficient.
Yeah, and for me, it's the operational efficiency, right? It's harder and harder for us to find employees that want to do manual labor or repetitive labor, etc. We have been, both of us, in the era of RPA and automation, and now we have new technology, AI, and the more we can actually slide away from that and have some technology to fix it, the more meaningful the work will get. And the more you can actually build on top and innovate, because the fact is that if we don't innovate in the Nordics and we don't innovate globally on enterprises, you'll just be in open competition with someone who might be applying the technology faster than you and taking market shares. So in the end, for me, ERP is the heartbeat and will be. It's not that I'm, for me, it's not even sexy. I just know how important it is for a business. And I know how important it is because that's where we have the struggles when we apply new technologies, when we adopt them.
But it's also been one of my key bullet points, just saying to people that if you want AI and you want AI in your systems, you're going to get it with the newest system. But if you're not modernized, you won't get that. So that's just the easy 1, 2, 3 of that, right? To some extent.
I had a talk with one from a major Danish bank. I do some road biking in my spare time, and he was running a big transformation and migration, and I said, like, roughly how many applications do you have? Yeah, we have 7,000-8,000 applications. It's like normally banks in the Nordics have any application. If it exists, they have it, right? But every one of those applications, you could roughly say 80% is now applying AI to the application and the service line, right? So you would have to re-engineer all your processes in order to understand how it affects what you already do.
Yes.
If not, then it's just 2 letters you have put into the naming of your software. But if you genuinely have done something to it, the process would break.
And then that bank has 8,000 new AI processes.
Exactly, that they would have to scope into the thinking of how do we go about, because one thing is what you are in control or not control of, or what you're adopting, from a technology itself. But then you have all your suppliers.
So tech speed becomes almost a SaaS issue here to some extent. And I've actually seen this case, right? A lot of companies staying on the old.
Yeah, because they don't dare to migrate.
But just because they know what it does.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And they're afraid of all the new features.
And what you see now is that major corporations, they're taking some of the most, I would say, some of the applications they have de-risked, and they run this exercise. So you're actually running POC on your application landscape to understand the full impact of AI delivered by your suppliers into your business.
Yeah, by default, yeah.
Yes. And for me, that's now I've been doing my fair share.
That's changed by default all over.
All over, and it's not one supplier, right? It's everyone.
Yeah, it is.
Because their value proposition to the market is like any other in tech and software. Is we have AI.
Yeah, and then you add to that. We haven't even talked about how all the employees just got AI using ChatGPT. That's a whole different thing. But all the suppliers, all the systems have just gotten AI as well, right?
So for me, then it strings together again. Me killing the enterprise architects. Sorry for all the enterprise architects. I generally know they do a good job, but you have to get.
You need more enterprise architects. Either you kill the one you have, or you hire 6-7 guys more.
Yeah, and then application management becomes more pivotal than ever.
Yeah.
Because you would have multiple. I would say, if you look at your business as omni, and you take technology from the outside in, right? Then you have not an attack, but you have an enabler by many applications at the same time that you already have in production. So your production is actually affected. Some would not update because they know how it will end up, but you really need to de-risk and do a risk profile of all your applications to understand the potential impact. Some would be exposed and say, okay, you have AI, but the process runs, right? So you don't really have it. But you will actually have to reopen negotiations with many of the companies because now they are delivering a service to you faster and quicker than ever, but they're charging you the same.
Yeah, or maybe they want to open it because they've added some AI capabilities on top that is like out of their baseline price, and now they have a variable cost on.
So enterprise architects and procurement will have glory days, right?
Yes. but that requires, and this is maybe what's actually coming right in the next wave here, because we've had this weird separation between innovation and risk to some extent. So if you're on the risk bandwagon in AI, you are on the naysayer conferences, right? Yeah. And if you're on the innovation, you're all the yaysayers who have big parties and fun music. So but when we start to hopefully get those to talk the same language, because innovation is nothing without risk, right? And as Borhan said in the last episode, again, he said that success is balanced risk, right? Then we need to have this discussion and have these enterprise architects and have procurement involved, and then it becomes a completely different game, right? Then innovation becomes actually what it's supposed to be about, transforming what we already have and taking that a step further by understanding what we need to do and what we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, and if you look at it, we will end up in a lot of blueprints and a lot of frameworks and etc. And the only thing we have to avoid here in tech IT is to go into the plateauscape, right? Where we go in and re-engineer and we look at everything and because it's happening out there. We can't really hide from it, right? So we need to find structured good approaches to how we would do our applications, how the architect becomes hybrid, right? I've had conversations with some of the biggest companies in Denmark and say, okay, if you took your tech people 5 years ago, they would always be on the dark side of the moon. As long as it worked, it was fine, right? But now the tech people, tech consultants, they actually understand the business that they are working for better than a management consultant, because they know where the flaws are in the ERP, etc. You could do improvements, right? So if you turn the moon a bit around and say, like, any tech consultant is now on the bright side of the moon, because it's actually on building the business. It's actually them building the improvements. Of course, you have your strategies. I'm not killing the management consultant. I'm one myself, right? But it's more that you will see more hybrid tech consultant roles. And I hope that the days where we have squeezed tech consultant salaries down to the bottom will change because they're actually done building the stuff.
But that's I would say actually almost that means that no one's in control, because the tech also developing the tech needs someone to tell them whys and
Yeah,
what's.
exactly.
And if no one can do that because they understand it better, then you just have a vacuum of no one knowing what's going on.
And
which might also be true some places.
And when I talk to some of the companies, they said like this is a huge role of change in the company, that tech SMEs who have not, of course they've had stakeholder relations, etc. But they need to understand better what the strategy is and how you'll go about, and not put them in the end and say, this is done, we want to build. So for me, we have to open more chairs in when we make decisions or we strategize or we plan for the future, because they actually know what we have, what we are capable of, how the steps could be. And that's a valuable input to how we realize the strategy. And this has been, I would say, the tipping point for many, many years, that you have a close room of people who will take a strategic decisions. But if we are now talking about how OpenAI, or Gen AI fired up the tech stack, etc., then it's more important than ever to have these people in the conversation in the early beginning, because technology is waiting for no one.
The strategy is about challenges that can be sort of matched to a solution, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Right? That's operationalizing strategy, at least, right? But your challenges today are digital, and your solutions will often also be digital.
And that takes a mindset of change for everyone around the table, because the new chairs would not be some that are familiar with being at the table, and the old table will be familiar with the approach and the methodology they had on taking strategy decisions.
So you're saying boardroom education should change?
Absolutely. And I would I'm the one applauding to have soundboards again, right? Because you're taking decisions for billions, right? And sometimes you have had one consultancy firm, and then you have a CIO who might be there for 2-3 years, and then she will be off again.
So what you're doing here, you're and this is also sort of alluding on to something I want to ask you also. You're elevating the techie to a boardroom level, right here, to some extent, and at the same time, NVIDIA is saying we don't need techies in the future.
I've been listening to so much of that for a year, that we don't need any techies.
We don't need graphical workers either. If you ask OpenAI,
if you look like who would build their stuff without techies, they need them themselves, right? And they are employing them big time. So if NVIDIA is not, if they are saying like we don't need any techies, the market should be floating. It isn't.
Yeah.
So it's a bit contradictory that they say that there's no need for it.
But what is this discrepancy, right, in this marketing and the real world? It's so huge, right? We don't need them, and they hire more than they've ever hired before. At the same time, the same company saying this and doing this. What is that doing to the market? Because this messaging goes into boardrooms and C-levels.
Yeah.
And the reality is the exact opposite.
For me, it's a flip side of a big translation, where you had billions adopting a new technology as the fastest we have ever seen, right? And at the same time, them not having the full understanding of how it will be adopted globally, how companies will adopt it. This with programmers, right? I have programmers in my team. Yes, they can do it faster, absolutely faster, 30-40% at times, right?
They're the ones that adopted this technology the most globally. Yeah.
But to say that I could put AI in production without pre-engineering, I've not seen that. I actually thought in the beginning, because you and I had a discussion on, I don't have to look for data quality any longer. It will fix it, right? It'll fix the rows and everything. I don't have to do all the sanitizing in the beginning. I was like, this is a revolution, right? And then we had the first, and we were spending 30% of the time sanitizing before we could actually bring it in production. So I was like, okay, so what is this? I remember we were walking around the lake in Gentofte talking about, how this would evolve and how fast it would grow. And in the end, we have engineers sanitizing, making it ready so it's crisp enough actually to run in production.
It is, as everything, it becomes task level automation, because we just go up a fractal.
Exactly. So for me, and I've seen it. I've been in tech and IT for quite some time. Every time something news comes, like everyone will be laid off and one man can run the show.
Yeah, 2014, Gartner said that your next CEO might be a bot.
Yeah. But it was you also have to.
They made the RPA bots.
You have to remember that the only one not having AI on the charts in 2019 was Gartner.
Yeah. But they had it in a mix of some other words, right?
Yeah,
But they
but
didn't, yeah, I get it.
it was not highlighted,
No,
right? It was not top of menu.
No, it wasn't.
Now it's absolutely top of any menu they have.
Yes.
So by that said, I have nothing against Gartner, but it is moving so fast that even the large research industries or players, they have a hard time actually to grasp what happens, right? How could we, you and I, and others residing in a company, sitting in a company, oversee that change?
Yeah, I just saw on Gartner that they just came out today, or was it a couple of days ago? Around right now, they came out with a new Magic Quadrant for RPA, right? And I remember some years back, not that many years back, RPA owned the automation term, right? But
Yes.
today it seems like everything that we do is automation, right?
Yeah.
And is that because of AI, or what is that? It feels like automation is nothing. No one owns it anymore. But it's your ERP is spoken about as an automation of transactions, right? And your BI is an automation of reporting, and your everything is automation, isn't it?
I would say you asked me a question about scale earlier. I would say the most enterprises see a scale and applying AI. I combined AI and automation from the early beginning,
Yes,
a year and a half
too,
back,
yeah.
right? And for me, it now sets the tone in the industries and enterprises that's where you can see some scale. It's fluid. It goes into your operations. You have done automation before. Now you can revisit some cases and say, okay, could we apply AI to it? I would say the question you asked me in the beginning, what I would redo, I would not say AI first. I would say digital first.
Yeah.
I went about and said AI first for a few months until I got wiser and got more experienced in it. And I was like, digital first, right? Because I truly believe, not as like an evangelist, but AI had the potential to lead the way, and then I recalibrated again. I make mistakes. I think I have to, because otherwise I can't have the jobs I've had. But in this, it was more on a change to say digital first.
You didn't make a mistake. You tested out
I tested out. Mistake it might be a strong pull on that, but I recalibrated again. That's actually a part of the constant in the end is recalibrating, right? Because it moves so fast that you need to be a more fluid leader. You need to take decisions in a different way. You don't absolutely have to have a stronghold in your strategies because they will change. But digital first is for me a major play, right? Because sometimes it could be a script. Other times it could be that you fully enable your AI applications into it. Other times it could be other digital solutions to it. AI is not a problem solver, right? It's a part of a solution that you could bring to market or bring to your enterprise and say, okay, we visit this approach from three or four technology angles or methodologies, from which AI is one of them.
Yeah, what I've said is that this is all about, and this is how I think it's all about, all the time expanding the digital footprint, and then what's possible with digital tools, and how we can make things faster and more efficient and serve our customers better. That's the point for any technology, whether you do it with BI, RPA, ERPs, AI, whatever you do. So that becomes the mantra, and that also means to some extent that I've said that we don't need necessarily AI frameworks, because AI is a tool that you can apply the right places, and it can expand your digital footprint. That must be the focus that we should have, right?
Yeah, I had a question yesterday on what the future looks like for me, and I would say I've been on so many cleanup missions during my career, and I would say if you look at the Nordic landscape or global landscape, how many people have been applied into or hired into AI departments, etc. We have an enormous firepower of people, right? And if they don't start to deliver, then even a C-level would say at a certain time, have we ramped up too fast? Do we have too many people? What do you produce? What did you do? And those mastering these departments or divisions or whatever in enterprise, they need to come up with a good plan on, one is to retain your people, right? Because if you're only delivering something internally or not internally in your own department or exploring, etc., they would find another place where it has to be meaningful, right? We really have to think of technology applied to humans or used by humans to do meaningful stuff. No one wants to sit around in a year and just explore and not talking to stakeholders and not making an impact on the business you are implied by.
Can we make any impact we want today? Can we do any change that people do? Is anything possible today?
No.
What do you still miss? Sorry.
I would say a lot is possible, right? But we you have had some clever many interesting. I've been hosting many interesting people on your podcast, and I would say the human being is a limitation to do everything, right?
Yeah, true, and figure out. Yes, exactly, and we are also still evolving as we spoke about. Yes,
exactly. So if we knew it all, right, then AI would have been there 10 years ago.
Yeah,
but we don't. So we are evolving also, and we are in a change, and will be that. The human being has been in a change since then we came to Earth, right?
Yeah,
and it will not stop. The difference is now that talking about technologies, etc., that we became digital. Compared to 50 years ago, we are now digital, right? Our children will grow up in a digital age. I grew up with Atari and Commodore 64 and Amiga and all that stuff. So I would say, luckily, I've been thankful for my parents for them investing in the early 286 PCs and stuff, right? Less firepower than a calculator from Texas nowadays, right?
Yes.
All that actually brought into for me, it became a mindset. It became a mindset that I've been embracing, not technology but hardware, right?
Yeah.
And I have tapes and stuff for my Commodore 64, and that's my that's my heritage, right? That's actually what brought me to where I am today. It's my thinking and how I approach stuff is based on that. I'm born in a digital age, actually, but not being born in a digital age. I've been there on frontier and then going forward, right?
Yeah.
Some would say that I saw. I know you're a big Arsenal fan, and I saw a reel last day. Like, no one in Arsenal's lifetime have been emailing on Gmail and Facebook and stuff that they have won the.
I saw that one as well. Thank you.
So I had to bring it up, right? and it's actually in a short time, but no one has been capable of, as an Arsenal fan, to say that they won the Premier League on a Gmail.
Yeah, okay.
But it's more to put perspective on time. And what we have been adopting over the years, and how fast it will evolve in the next 10, 20 years as well, right?
Yeah. And it is the humans that are pulling it, right? It also, now I have Bo's podcast episode very much fresh in mind because the last episode I did, right? But he also said, intelligence and AGI and all that, you never will we ever get to that, because it's all about it's desirability of intelligence, and that desirability means that it's always the human evaluation of it in the end, and humans move. So we will keep pulling technology after us. It will never go ahead of us, because that's what decides what's intelligent.
I look more as on AGI as a pole or a vision.
Yeah. But the vision is, and also the fear is that it will move ahead of us and not be something that we pull along, but something that suddenly pulls us. Yeah. And that's why I'm saying that, if we take that demand as a fractal, that it will always end in a human, or we say that it's about intelligence is always connected to what's desirable, as Bo says in the podcast, then we will always be ahead. Yeah. We can never be surpassed. And maybe we need, now it's early days, right? But maybe we need to realize that. Maybe that will be in 5 years, but we'll start realizing that, okay, we will always be ahead, and then take that seriously.
But you
instead of dreaming of something or fearing something that's absurd.
I think if we take if we revisit that from an enterprise level, right? A company will not be better than its human capital.
No, but also imagine a company that suddenly the customer will be pulling the company something, but of course
they already do.
The company also pull the customer sometimes, right? Sometimes.
If you look at the markets, right? If you look at the markets, what new have you brought into your home in the last 20 years that hasn't been an evolution of something you already had? you can take the headset we have on today, right? That's an evolution of something we had in prior. The quality might be hardware changed,
phone, smartphone, all that.
Exactly,
cell phone,
right? So if you look like what have you brought into life for the past 10 years, that is something that you didn't have.
Absolutely novel. Let me just have a 2-second think about that. Must be something.
But if you're intellectual, right? You have to search for it.
It has to be something.
Yeah, but you really have to search for it, right?
Yeah. With the lack of imagination we have as humans.
So
now you're actually
if you're pairing that into to the conversation we have on it might overtake or be in the front of us, then we have just been maintaining for 10 years. We have just, refining what we already had, made it better, improved.
I'm still thinking, but you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I can't find anything. I'm running through all my kitchen appliances now, of course,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And I can't find anything that's not just an incremental evolution of something.
Or minimizing, or
speeding up,
decentralizing, or centralizing, all that stuff.
They're wireless now.
Yeah, exactly. Who, by the way, needs a wireless blender? I have never got that.
No. Okay, no.
I actually did a
then
project.
Then you can bring it outside into your garden, right?
I did a project in DXE once. I was employed in DXE Technology, where we had a team of hackers going to a parking place in Holland. And then we park them outside and say, okay, because some of the hardware in the departments or the home decor store were actually you could turn the blender on, right? It was Wi-Fi, right? So they could actually hack the blender inside and start a fire from the van.
Funny. Brilliant.
So by that, I'm not against Wi-Fi. Of course,
no, but you're also saying that digital is exposed, right? And Denmark is not very digital and we're very exposed to,
So it's also, we are now seeing re-engineering of what we already have. The change here is, if you look at it, the service you do in your company, the service a bank does, haven't changed for 150 years. You put your money in, you take your money out. You invest in something that's provoked by a market or whatever, and you take your money out. The transaction itself is the same as it's been for 200 years. But the services around it has become the complexity.
Yeah.
And that complexity is regulations, anti-money laundering, whatever, all this around.
You said the two regulations there. You said regulations and the regulation.
Yes, exactly.
I wanted to say something else than regulation. Say something else than regulation, right, please?
So if you take
digital banking. Okay, there we go.
If you take all the services around the actual transaction, that's the complexity we brought into it, right? And some is from the EU or from the States, etc. But in the end, the service itself is the same.
You made me think also earlier a little bit funny about adding AI to all the products, right? Do you have something that's AI enabled? Some funny weird stuff in your home? Do you have the Axe AI?
Yeah, no, I don't.
Or the Coca-Cola made an AI flavor or something like that?
No, right now
AI toothbrush I've also seen.
Yeah. It could be my son. It's not he has a lot of stuff, but I don't actually think we have something. Yeah, I have my phone. Right?
Yeah, but it's not something you bought because it said AI.
No, I'm actually trying to avoid
still using the old Axe.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to avoid it because I really have to believe in it before I buy something with AI. And even doing an AI phone, right? It's just... Yeah, when I saw those
what are they called? Those the ones you put in your shirt? I can't remember the name of them.
I saw them.
Remember them.
Yeah.
But that was, and it was just built on Android. It's like, what is going on here?
I saw them presented at a lot of conferences. At the beginning, you could talk to it. It didn't work, and it was VC funded. VC is fine, but it was VC funded, and now it's out of market again, right? and then the entire idea of hardware and AI and wearing it and talking down to your shirt.
People wanted so much to be Steve Jobs.
For me, it's not an evolution. It's just in a backstep.
No, yeah. But Allan, okay, let's just get back to the enterprise thing a little bit. So you've had tons of providers pitch solutions to you in your role. You also alluded to that earlier, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is interesting for a lot of people, right? What is your advice to providers in the current tech market, and what's the golden rule for buyers?
I would say for the providers in the market, they need to understand. For the past 8 months, I've had the most cold calls in my world in my entire career. I would say 9 out of 10 selling major, nice, good solutions. They think it's good, etc., and they could provoke the business. They could change the business or whatever. Right? For me, I would go back to the providers and say, okay, build a keen pipeline of companies you want to approach. Take your time to understand them. Take your time to understand their actual problems, and then come with the solution. Right? Then approach them and say, okay, do we have
verticals or?
Yeah, it could be vertical, but unless you're talking to C-level, then they would most likely not know, and then they will take a few stakeholders to the meeting. But for me, I've seen the rush, the AI rush, have come to a state where I've had so many calls and so many wanting to introduce what they can. In the early beginning, and I invited some. We were actually at that time in front of those, so we ended up educating the provider.
We also had that experience. We went to a conference together, and we were like, okay, this looks.
Yeah, exactly.
Some vendors presenting something.
So the quality.
I'm a vendor as well, so I'll be.
The quality you put into your business,
yes,
and I put into my business, I want to be reflected when you come and present something for me.
But the problem is that this is novel for you. It's novel for the vendors. It's novel for everyone. And what vendors usually do, and maybe this is actually. You've heard this as well, consultants bring in inspiration from other companies all the time.
Yeah.
But there was none to be had. And that's why they sounded flat on AI in the beginning, right?
Yeah. And I've seen vendors when
there's no banks doing this before. There's no insurance companies done this for 10 years, 20 years, like with RPA. There's no one to learn from.
No
one to imitate.
And in this, I talked to some providers, and I actually took the liberty to visit their company afterwards and advising them on how to go to market. Not as a lecturer, but as an. I think for me,
listen, guys, I won't buy from you. This is
I
what you need to do.
I might be a philanthropist at times, right? Normally when I go to coffee meetings and talk to people that I think I can learn from a lot of people. But I usually end up in me being the one, putting perspectives and stuff into the conversation and not doing a TED talk or masterclass, because I'm not that skillful, but it's more it ended up with the providers in the initial phase of AI saying like, you can't really help us, right? So for us, and we talked about that in Aarhus, where I was invited by Lasse and company to take my view on the impact on AI for C-level or your organization, and I took the approach at that time to say that we need to be closer to the big tech because it's actually them building the product, right?
Yeah.
So the provider was squeezed, and still are, in my opinion. They need to be very consolidated. They need to be a partner to some of the big techs in order to understand, because they are also at a time where they have to adopt and learn before they go to me, right? And they don't use the playground because they have to sell. So sometimes I've seen a PPT slide of something, and then they want to sell it to me, and they haven't tried it out yet. And for me, there are many ways. What we did is we partnered up with some and say, we are a trusted partner. I'll put some money in it. You'll put some money in it, and then we go for 2 or 3 years, because we know that you can't and we can't absorb, etc. Now we go for a longer run together, and we explore together instead of me changing the providers every year, etc.
Yeah.
So we build in trust in the fashion that we say, okay, we have a few that we really believe, we have a really good relation, we have a good chemistry. No one knows what would happen in a year and a half or a full year. But if we do this gentleman agreement on how we approach it, then I'll not invite many other providers, because they would be in the same.
This is also, and I said this before, SMBs tend to buy products, but enterprise buy partners.
Yeah.
And that's the way you have to do it, right? To trust someone.
And for me, the trusted advisory is the key for the future. It's the key for the next few years. Find something that you really believe in. You've done some amazing project with that has a good chemistry with your employees, etc. And team up with them. And not being blind on what moves in the market, but unless you have a research team, they would actually be the one saying like, this is happening now, or we should explore. We know your infrastructure. We should apply this.
Yes.
Of course, there's a lot of trust to put into it, but if you have human capital at a high level on your receiving end, being the company buying from the provider, you're actually putting yourself in an ideal situation where you're kind of outsourcing, but you're paying for it, but you're not running a full department on.
You're extending your own COE, or you're extending your company.
Absolutely.
That way. Yes,
so
exactly.
Advisory for me is a key, and another part is, do you due diligence on providers? Do you what do you need? What do you really need? Do you need an explorative sessions at innovative, and you want to understand something of the future, invite some in? But if you are more narrowing down to what your actual problem is, or you want to have a solution for, then it's also easier to scope all the cold calls and say, yeah, I'm blocked because we have the providers.
And that also means if you narrow down to what your problems are, what you need solutions for, that also means, on the other hand, that vendors should be more focused on domain knowledge than necessarily the tech
exactly.
stuff. Yes. Good. Allan, this has been a really great conversation, and it's a brilliant podcast episode. I'm pretty sure people are going to love most of your answers and the discussion we've had. But this brings me also to the last question, which we always do as, it's just both the centerpiece and the final piece of the podcast. So I hope you're ready for that.
Yeah, I am.
So, Allan, what is the only constant?
That nothing is constant. Really, it is. Because if you look at it in the hour or bits of pieces we've been talking now, all the things we have touched has been change, evolutions, etc. So if I have to put a constant in, I would actually be contradicting what we've been talking for more than an hour, right? So for me, some of the brilliant people you have had in had they talked about change and people in the loop, etc. I think we have to bring in a methodology and philosophy on that nothing is constant, and how we would evolve our business and enterprise is that we state the fact that nothing is static, nothing is constant. So applying that change would also affect how you build your business, how your organization would look like, how you hire in the future, how you scope your projects, what's in the projects, who you engage with. We've been talking about providers. We have been talking about having trusted advisors, etc. So if you take your business now and you take it 10 years back, the service is the same. That's actually a constant, right? You haven't changed the service as such. We concluded that, semi-concluded, because you're still thinking, I think, on what it could be. But the service is constant, but we have to look at what's not constant. That's the services around what we actually offer. Right? And that's where we have to, that's, for me, I have, because I'm schooled in management consultancy, it's like sometimes it's follow the money or follow the problem, because that is the money. For me, it's like the 3 pointers I had earlier, right? And on your Omni, how intuitive are you? How do I get in contact with you? And what is the professionalism or whatever you have, right? That's for me the money game. Whether you enable it with AI or whatever, that's digital first. But in the end, that's what your consumer or investors, etc., they're looking at. They'll be judging you on 3 single lines, right? And if you have them in order and you run an operational business and it works, then you will have a good presence in the market. If not, you'll be struggling with taking an answer or having no CRM, or you don't understand the data. You'll have 3 calls. I've had 3 calls from my telco company within a week asking me whether I'm satisfied with my subscription. It's like, couldn't you put it in the CRM that 3 people have now called me? I'm happy. So if you call me again, I'm unhappy.
So Allan, the only constant is that there's no constant, or there's everything's digital, or your 3 rules.
Yeah.
All fit. That's a great and very expansive constant, Allan. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Les.
And thank you so much for being on The Only Constant. It's been a real pleasure to have you here.
Likewise.
Oh, for you to have me here.
Yeah, exactly.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.